Thanks so much, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Our next guest is one of the great American stage actors, one of the great actors that we have. And now he has stepped into an already legendary role as Quinn Carney, head of the Carney family household in the incredible, instantly classic, The Ferryman. Please welcome Brian Darcy James. Let's hear it.
Thank you,
Brian. Congratulations. These are no small shoes to fill, and I saw your performance last night, and you fill them beautifully.
So let's talk about the shoes. Paddy Considine, who played Quinn before, and Laura Donnelly, who played Caitlin, and everybody in that cast who originated this were are extraordinary people, and we feel as a new cast of 15 out of 21, we feel a great responsibility to carry the ball that they so mightily and beautifully carried. So that is a big ask when you're so in love with the play that you're doing.
How do you let that go? Because you have to let that go going into, I mean, as much as you revere and want to do the best job, when you step into the rehearsal room, you have to let that stuff go or you won't be able to perform.
It's true, and the benefit that we had was that there were so many of us coming in that it really was like starting with a field that hadn't been, plowed with no seeds in it, and so we were all coming up together and learning and bumping into things and failing and really coming together as a company. So that was one huge asset for us, is that we never, even though we were coming into something that already existed, we felt that what we were doing, just by virtue of the sheer numbers of our cast, that we were creating something that was unique to us and still obviously honoring the play. And a lot of it has to do, I have to say, with our director, Sam Mendes, and our associate director, Tim Hoare, who allowed us to find our own way and kind of create our own boundaries within our family and create our own family dynamic.
That's an incredible amount of patience that everybody has to have. On Sam Mendes' part and his associate's part, Tim Hoare, they've already made this play, they've put it together, and then they get a new group of actors who have to find their way through it, to find the authenticity and the moments that Sam already knows are there, but he can't tell you those moments. He can't tell you exactly how to get there. He has to allow you to find your own way. There's a patience I can't imagine that is required,
I think you're afforded a lot of patience in this sense because of the blueprint, the play that has been written by Jez Butterworth. There is, as we were discussing before, it is a beautiful play, and I agree with you. It's an instant classic. And so when the cogs of the machine are so beautiful and are so running so smoothly and so beautifully, that I think there's a lot of confidence, I'm assuming, from people. Obviously, they want this play to continue, and so it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to actually to be inserted into that, and I think that shows a lot of confidence by the producers and certainly the director Sam and Tim to allow that to happen, and it's because of the play.
Because there's so many things on the page, or when you go to see a play, a great play feels in some ways effortless, like everything makes sense, And on the page, you would imagine all that stuff makes sense, but it doesn't for actors a lot of the time. The best actors have to take their time and be like, well, why am I doing this? How do I get myself there to make sure that I am fulfilling the author's intentions emotionally?
Yeah, that's very true. And in this case, there are 21 characters that are bouncing around in this little farmhouse, and it's a remarkable thing because the characters are so distinct and so well drawn, and yet it is inevitable that when you're creating the world that we're living in, there's so many opportunities to try to understand what exactly is my relationship with the youngest daughter, Honor Carney. What is my relationship to my sister's son? One of the Corcoran boys. There's so many familial tangent spokes on that wheel that is kind of never-ending in terms of the exploration of character.
Because you have maybe 2 lines dedicated to one character at one point in the play, one of the sort of peripheral characters that you're not always interacting with, but those 2 lines are supposed to elicit a wealth of background and ideas like you're talking about, and the lines themselves can't say that out loud because then it would just be expository and boring.
Right, and I think there's a lot of that in the play, just in terms of the history of these characters, and certainly how history becomes infected into the present, and past actions become, the chickens come home to roost, if you will. So that's a big part of this, in terms of how people are able to connect, how they walk away from things, and the consequences thereof.
Did you see the play before you had been cast?
Yeah, I saw it in London.
I saw it in London.
I have to. The preamble to this is that I saw Jerusalem by Jez Butterworth with the almighty Mark Rylance, and the combination of that performance and that play was really something. I was able to say this, thankfully, to Jez on our first day of rehearsal. He changed my life. He really changed my life, because when you witness something, you do something for a long while, and you become equipped, and you become familiar with the surroundings, and you think, okay, I kind of know what I'm doing here. And then you see something like Jerusalem, and the ceiling all of a sudden goes, and you think, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. I have so far to go on this road that I'm so lucky to travel. And so I was so moved by that play, and so I was awed by it. I was in awe of all of it. And so when I saw the Ferryman in London, I knew it was a Jez Butterworth play. I knew it was about an Irish family. I didn't know much more. And how many times does lightning strike, and certainly did again. So to be in this play is nothing short of miraculous to me, because it's kind of like dreaming to play for your favorite sports franchise as a kid, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, go ahead, take a bat.
The Ferryman to me is the kind of work that there are different kinds. There's bad work. There's work that we think is okay. There's work that's great and we really love it. And then there's work that's like, pack it in. I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't try anything anymore, because they have figured it out. They mastered something. So why bother at this point?
Well, that is certainly a feeling that I can relate to. But then hopefully the next thought is, you know what? I'm going to try.
Of course.
I'm going to try. So that's the
next thought is inspiration.
Yeah,
but the
exactly.
first one is like, oh
nope,
my God.
I'm done. I better go home.
They did it, guys.
That's it.
We figured art out. This is it.
Yeah.
And we can move on.
That's kind of, I think I'll speak for this whole company, this new group of people that have come into this play. I think we have a severe dedication to this play, because it is really something that we feel is extraordinary, and that's not always the case. You can appreciate something, you can appreciate a great role, you can appreciate aspects of a great production, but there's something about this play that is clearly resonating with the people that come to see it, but it's resonating in a way that I've never experienced, and especially with so many people in a cast, in a way that it makes it such a delight to go to work, because you're so unified in your attempt to do your best.
It also is it straddles both worlds really well. Like, I think it's an incredibly accessible play, but also for highbrow theater heads, it's an incredible work as well. You can see it working the way that old classics worked, and you can see an audience of tourists in there riveted by the thing while they're watching it, who are probably going to go see, I don't know, Wicked or something the following day. They're just as riveted, which is as a theater goer, that's a rare experience for me.
It's true.
I find myself at plays that I love looking around at tourists going, how did we get here? What is this thing?
Yeah, for people who don't know the play, it's set in 1981 in Northern Ireland during the so-called Troubles, where violence was really bubbling up and becoming a huge part of the culture there. And the play takes place in a farm in Armagh in Northern Ireland, and my character used to be associated with the IRA, so he is steeped in that world and that culture of violence, and now has extricated himself so he can raise his family and hopefully start a new chapter in his life. And to your point about the complexity of the play, what Jez Butterworth has done in my mind is this double helix of political drama and political exploration of the times of Northern Ireland and that culture of violence and secrecy, and how that manifests itself in people literally vanishing from the world and the evil that men do. And
a certain kind of tribalism, if you will.
Absolutely.
If you want to sort of make it resonate in the moment.
Yes, yeah. all of that goes into that very complex discussion. And then the other side of that strand is unbelievably potent and good old-fashioned love story of a man who has a family with 7 children with his wife Mary, played by Emily Bergel, and then his sister-in-law, who is now the widow of his brother, who has been murdered by the IRA, and she's been living with this family just as a safe haven, a place to live and for her son to live, and the unrequited love that is brewing and has been brewing with them over the last 10 years, and how complicated that relationship is. Throughout the play, there are so many examples of unrequited love. Tom Kettle, one of the men who works on the farm, his love is unanswered for with Caitlin, and in a way.
What's interesting about that scene though with Tom Kettle, not to interrupt, it's a good move he pulls. Like, it's not supposed to be, but when I was watching the play last night, 3rd time I'd seen it, and he flips the cards out and bends down and pulls out.
Who wouldn't want to say
like,
yes?
What a move! That's really well thought out and solid way to propose.
It's true. It's a good point.
Yeah.
It just incidentally, Jez shared the playwright Jez Butterworth shared some insight about particular things in his life, and that if I don't mean to speak for him, but I don't think it's. I think I can. That happened in his real life. He saw this man propose to his mother, and walked in on this very strange and uncomfortable situation of a man that lived in their community and was moved to profess his love for his mother. So anyway, that's fascinating in and of itself.
So let's backtrack once again. You see the play, you're dazzled by it, bowled over by it, as you are again after another Jez Butterworth play. How long until this works out that someone is talking to you about possibly taking over the role?
About a year. So I saw it last Christmas, right after Christmas, and I knew that there were plans bubbling up about it coming to Broadway, and I said to my agent, I said, look, I don't know what they're planning, and I don't know if they're going to be able to get this incredible cast to come over. If they can't, please throw my hat in the ring and just let them know that my knuckles will be bloody from knocking on that door, and then as fate would have it, the cast that currently started the show, the predominant number of them are up with their contracts and have families and have been doing this for 3 years, and for whatever reason,
time to move on.
To move on, and so that comes the call of well, this is a possibility now.
And what was your first feeling when you got that call that this was a possibility?
One of seeing kind of a sliver of a chance that this could be possible, and how kind of miraculous that might be. Yeah, it was just kind of I still kind of can't believe it, because there are things, like I said, there are things that you are so drawn to and you're so inspired by and you're so awed by, and then to be asked to inhabit that character and inhabit that world and be responsible for the telling of that story is really the hugest honor. It's hard to articulate without repeating myself.
Excuse me, Quinn, one of the things that I love about the character is that as much as when we meet him in the play, he's a family man, he's dedicated to his family, he's a good man, but there is still that rage inside of him from that time when he was in the IRA. Whether it's directed at them or it's directed at something that's irritating him around him, we can see the first semblances of that when he yells at his aunt because she won't stop talking about the IRA. And it's scary all of a sudden. It's not the same as a normal person asking someone to please stop or shut up. There is a violent rage that he has inside of him. How do you tap into that?
That's a good question.
Because it has to be scary when it happens.
It is, yeah. And I think what Jez is doing is two things there. It's character revelation, but it's also important to the story in terms of Aunt Pat's dedication to the cause and what she sees to be noble and right and just in terms of keeping these stories alive and keeping our awareness alive. She's railing against the fact that we're stuffing ourselves here on Harvest Day, and there are people literally dying, during the hunger strikes to make a point about freedom. And the contrast and the dissonance on that is not lost on her, and it's something that Quinn is trying very, very much, very hard to protect his family from, for lack of a better word, an infection of that zeal.
Because he's seen what the IRA has kind of become, at least within their community.
That's right. He's born and bred of that culture, and you know, we talked a lot about my relationship with Jimmy Muldoon, who was played brilliantly by Ralph Brown in the play, and at the point that Jimmy comes back, he is a graduated member of the IRA, a person who's highly respected and revered for what he's done for the cause, and their brotherhood in terms of how they came up together and the betrayal that he may or may not feel from Quinn's walking away from the cause. And so that's another example of kind of a love broken and trying to find its way back to some sort of détente or some kind of connection. Another brilliant example of the effort to find connection.
Did you have any conversations with Paddy Considine prior to starting rehearsals or anything?
Just one.
Just
I was
one?
walking into the theater to get my hair cut, and he was, and I was leaving actually, and he was coming in, and I was able to introduce myself and just tell him how brilliant he was, and how lucky I felt to be able to hopefully do right by him.
What did he say?
He was very, very kind and just said, "Yeah, go to it," you know. And it was a very. I'm really glad I got to say that to him, because I had seen Dean Ashton, who was in the production. I'd seen him do Quinn in London. So Dean plays a part in the play. In the original company, he plays McGinnis, who you see in the prologue of the play, and who delivers the first speech to the priest.
Right.
And
the guy reading the paper, who then one of Muldoon's goons.
That's right. Yeah. So I had seen him play the role of Quinn. So that was my introduction, watching Dean do it, and he was brilliant.
I didn't realize that Paddy didn't do it in the West End.
He did, but I think he was just out that night.
Oh, got it.
So I had a chance to see Paddy do it on my first day of rehearsal. I knew I wanted to see the play, and I didn't want to see it too far into our exploration of the play. And so I saw it on the first day of our rehearsal, and was able to see both Paddy and Laura Donnelly, who plays Caitlin, who also I hadn't seen. There were two understudies on that night, both brilliant, in London.
But that must have been so helpful for you, just in the fact that you had seen two separate performances.
That's right. That's a
rather
great
than
point.
just having one tattooed in your memory.
That's a really good point.
Immediately seeing that it can be done, I wouldn't say in different ways, but it can be done with different emotionalities and different temperaments.
That's a great point, because I think that's, again, a testament to the play, the strength of the play, and you can have different shades of expression. It's just going to be inevitable by virtue of the individual that's inhabiting the character. So you're right about that. I hadn't thought about that, but I think you're right. Perhaps in the back of my brain, it allowed me to think that, oh yeah, okay, this thing you can careen this way or careen that way, and it's the railings are still going to be strong, and they're going to hold for no matter who's doing it.
Right, like they don't own that role.
Yeah, and that's another thing about the role. I honestly feel this way. It's one of those roles that will be inhabited from here on out, and so it's not. I'm going to do my best to do my best, but it's bigger than me. The whole play is bigger than all of us. I believe that to my core.
Yeah, but usually when a play is that, it's already been declared that several years ago, like Death of a Salesman or something. So that Death of a Salesman has since been performed many, many, many times over. And maybe Dustin Hoffman kind of owned it at one point, but then Philip Seymour Hoffman kind of owned it. And so you can tune that out a little bit.
Yeah.
But a new play that's already being called a classic with one person at the helm, it seems so lucky that you were able to kind of slip in an understudy night early on.
No, I agree. I agree. The whole thing is remarkable.
And you worked with Sam Mendes and Tim Hoare in six weeks of rehearsal?
That's right.
Did that feel like enough?
It did. It's quite luxurious, to be honest. Usually in the Broadway community, when you're being inserted into a show that's already running, there's limited time to do it, because costs are high and the show is running, and they want to do their best to make it efficient.
Wait, can I ask you a dumb question? Where do you rehearse? Because the stage the set is such a part of the show. It's a massive part of the show. It's its own character. So where are you guys rehearsing?
We're rehearsing in New 42nd Street Studios, which is where a lot of shows rehearse. But to your point about the set, we have an amazing stage management company, and what they did on the very first day was there was a literal representation of that kitchen. As much of the things that they could have in working order. There's a stove that actually works on stage. There's a faucet that works. All is functional. But in our case, we had a semblance of that. And then, of course, the requisite tape around the floor, which gives you the sense of where the space is, and doors that slam and that are
Is your first night on the stage actually performing on the stage in front of an audience?
No. So what makes this unique as well in terms of the technical aspect of it is that we had 2 weeks of technical rehearsals. Wow. But interestingly, usually when you tech a show, there's not a show going on at the same time that already exists. You're trying to figure out what it is. In this case, we would tech 4 hours a day on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays.
Like in the morning?
Yeah, from 12 to 4. And then Wednesdays and Saturdays you couldn't because the matinee was taking place. So we had 8 times in 4-hour segments to avail ourselves of the.
Did you catch any of the original cast trying to take a peek at your tech rehearsals?
I was astounded and so touched that we had an invited dress rehearsal, and 2 of the members of the company took the time to come see it, and that was really, really touching to me. There may have been more, but the actor playing Shane Corcoran and the actor playing Tom Kettle both I happened to meet them kind of again on my way in and their way out, exchanging high fives. Just I was so moved that they took the time to do that.
I think everybody associated with this play has just like a deep love for it. The play culminates, without giving anything away for those who haven't seen it, the play culminates in a moment of action and incredible action choreography. What was it like getting that done and making that work? Because
you say getting it done as if
I say it like get her done.
No.
Larry the Cable Guy.
I bring it up only to suggest that I'm still in the process of figuring that out. We're in the second week of this journey on this play, and what you're describing is a particularly dramatic and hopefully when it's done well, just kind of a mind-blowing thing that occurs, which takes some dexterity, which I have not mastered yet. So
well, last night it was great. It worked.
I'm glad
great.
You think so.
But at the same time, every time I've seen it, I have thought to myself, if you fuck this up, like you fuck the whole play up. Yeah, like if you miss one beat of
I won't be thinking
thing,
about that at all tonight, Ricky.
Sorry.
There's all kinds of fail safes. They've thought about that. Yeah.
I guess I can't ask I'll ask you off stage what those fail safes are, because since the first time I saw it, I've been fascinated that like it would have the guts to end the play that way, not just narratively, but physically, and have the whole thing hinge on this moment of choreography that, like, if there's one slight thing, the audience could go, what?
Yeah.
And then, like, it's gone.
Yeah.
That
is one of the great things about that moment among many in the play, but I do think that moment in particular leaves you with the audience having lots to digest and gives them it gives them, in a way, kind of a bit of a sledgehammer to open up a conversation about everything that they've seen preceding that, to discover and to figure out how and why this play comes to the culmination that it does, because it has a lot to say about. It's not the definitive thing to say, but it is one big gesture about what this cycle of violence is in the Troubles, and how that plays itself out in many different ways, in unexpected ways.
We have a question coming in from Twitter. The question is, how does your process working in theater different from your approach to TV film work?
The process is really determined by the time you're given to explore and work on something. Theater, typically you have a good amount of time to gestate and to figure out what you're going to do and rehearse. And so in film and TV, the actor, in most cases, you're left to yourself to do your research and to know kind of what it is that your character is and what the context of the play is and what the play means, or the teleplay or the screenplay. And then because once you're there, you get on board, and that escalator's moving already, so you just kind of have to be ready to jump on. So I suppose it's a question of how you're able to use the time to prepare is different.
I wonder, I thought about this recently, because theater, you linger longer with the characters, scenes are more drawn out and build to much greater, not greater depth, but they build in a different way. And TV and film has to be much more direct. The scenes are much shorter, and they have to really state their purpose and intent quite quickly. If that in and of itself makes it a little bit easier in TV and film, where when you have a decent writer for a television show or for a movie like Spotlight, you can go into the scene and be like, I know what my character's motivation in this scene is, and I know what he's trying to get out of it. And you can kind of do that with a play, but also at the same time, a character's motivations and objectives can shift and move and kind of become a little bit blurry throughout an entire 10, 15-minute or full act scene.
That's the beauty of theater, is that once you start, you are allowed the space to ride that wave, for lack of a better analogy, of just being on the wave of the play, and so that you're not necessarily having to create moments that will represent what the author wants you to represent. It's happening in a very organic way if it's done well, if it's written well. The character is expanding as the actor is expanding and figuring out what exactly the labyrinth through which they're traveling is kind of I'm thinking about Laura Donnelly, because I saw her interview with you sitting right here in this chair, and she summed it up very well by saying, in this play, you just kind of start the play, and the play takes you. You don't necessarily have to kind of like turn the wheel for your character. The play just takes you where you need to go, and it's a wild ride. So that is the great thing about the theater, as opposed to television and film, where you're constantly starting and stopping that process, and you have to be able to kind of stop on a dime, or I'm thinking of the analogy of jumping off of a high dive into a small barrel, or like a real small target. You got to hit that target in that 35 seconds, and then move on to the next thing, and hope that you're equipped to do the same thing for what that scene is required in a movie or a television show. But in theater, you kind of have one long sweep of an exhale or an inhale, which is helpful.
And by the time that you get to that miniature hole that needs to be hit, you have already been doing so much of the work to get you there.
And not to mention the fact,
and the play has as well.
Not to mention the fact that if you miss the hole, that an editor can say, you know what, we're going to make it look like you hit it by not showing the landing, or just showing you preparing. I mean, there's so many things that can...
Showing the reverse on the other character.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good job. You did it. When in fact you're splatted over here on the right side. But that's another element to that craft, which is a blessing and a curse, perhaps, depending on how you look at it.
I think depending on the project, or depending on how you felt about how you did, it could be a blessing or a curse.
Yeah.
Could we cut to some B-roll over that line, maybe?
Right.
You're doing an Irish accent in the play, and I'm always fascinated for actors. I think sometimes one of the hardest parts about acting is finding the naturalism in a word or in a feeling, and feeling comfortable saying it on stage. And in a lot of ways, as much as Irish is very close to English, the Irish in this play is very embedded. It's very real, and so therefore you're at times speaking what sounds like a different language for you. How do you find the authenticity in those words that you didn't really come up with? How do you find a comfort in that?
Well, I'm lucky in that I worked on a couple of Northern Irish plays, and have worked with a lot of Irish actors in my time. And I did a play called Public Enemy, which was at the Irish Arts Centre back in 1994. We took it to Dublin. It was written by Kenneth Branagh, of all things, and it was about Northern Ireland. So that was my first introduction. I remember when I auditioned for it, I just watched In the Name of the Father and Daniel Day-Lewis for 6 days straight, trying to
get it in your
just
head.
To hear it and understand it. So that was my introduction to the Northern Irish accent, and then knowing Irish actors who weren't necessarily from the North, but were talented enough to be able to take that on, the shift of that tone from, say, a Dublin accent to a Derry accent, being absorbed by that and learning from them and the subtleties of what that means. So I had a bit of that in my DNA a little bit. But I think there's a more interesting thing that occurs. You know, I don't want to speak for the whole cast, but we are an American cast, and we are trying to do our best to make this an authentic Irish play. And it's a double-edged sword because you obviously want to get it right. And we have a cast member who's Terrence Kelly, who's from Belfast, who's been very helpful. I'll say, hey, how do you say, resources? And he's like, oh, don't hit the S so much. He's the real deal. So that's super helpful.
Don't hit the S. So it's like
resources,
Okay.
It's more of a Z sound. So, just little things like that, fine-tuning. But on the other hand, it's a balancing act of trying your best to be authentic and sound authentic and make sure, because that you want that to happen, obviously. But to be a slave to it can be a bit of a fool's errand in the sense because you can spend all your time creating a sound and robbing yourself of meaning. Right. And so it's really a combination of doing both of those things. So you're striving really hard to make it sound right, but you're not doing it at the expense of of a human being saying words that mean something. So there's a bit of a balancing act.
I will say, upon seeing it last night with the American cast, and having seen it twice with the mostly Irish and British cast, I understood a lot more words from the American cast. I think there's a difference. There's just a difference in the dialect.
Yeah, that might be a helpful thing,
Just because it was my third time and I was starting to get it.
Could be. I mean, because there is a lot to digest in the play. So there's a lot going on. So it is no pun intended. It is a feast of words, and it is so many relationships. But I do think you're right too. The colloquialisms of Irish speak and Northern Irish in particular, and the rhythms of it and the inflection of it is very particular. And if that's something that comes naturally, of course it's going to be you're going to be riveted by it because it's authentic. But if it's not something that is natural and yet is replicated well, you're probably going to get a little bit more of an every word feeling, which perhaps is a good thing, just in terms of adding up what the playwright is saying.
I enjoy an every word feeling every now and then. Yeah, I saw Disco Pigs at the Irish Arts Center one time, and I was blown away by it. And I think I understood like every other word maybe during it.
Well, that's another great point, if I will. I mean, it shouldn't matter because even if it's like watching a great foreign film, if you don't know the language and if the story's well told, you're going to be on board and you're going to be connected to the characters. And if you only get every 1 out of 5 words or 1 out of every 3 words, you know what's happening in the story, and hopefully that's what's happening in this play as well, is because the themes are so potent, and the love and the yearning and the need for connection and protection and preservation and honor and dignity. All these words are things that come to mind when that's what we're trying to demonstrate.
I think we have time for a couple audience questions. Who has a question right here? Hi.
Hi. So my question is, every night, like, what is your favorite scene to do? Like the one you're most excited to get to in the play?
I love the feast scene. It's when the whole company is literally sitting down to eat a big meal, and the meal is real. It's actual meat, it's actual potatoes, it's vegetables, and it's on the 3rd floor of the theater. Our props master Clem has to cook a whole feast of a meal every single day, and so whenever you walk by that, you think, oh, it's going to be a good dinner tonight. It's going to smell so good. But it's just a great moment because there's a lot going on in the subtext of that particular scene, but it's also it just never fails to make my heart swell to look around and see all of these people who I love so much. I just love every one of our company, and particularly the young women playing the girls in the show. They're just so great and real, and I love that moment.
One of the young girls in the play has I think a line that for people who see the show will remember it forever, which is when she finds out that her fortune is read and she's gonna have 9 children when she gets older. Yeah. And there's a long pause and she says, "Fuck me blue." The whole audience is uproarious and goes crazy.
Yeah, not something you expect.
No, not at all.
To say.
One more question.
Hi. I was wondering if you have a pre-show ritual or music you listen to or something before you go on stage.
I don't, not in particular for this play. It's interesting you mentioned music because the very first introduction to my character is listening to a Rolling Stones song and really enjoying it. So that was a lot of my, during my rehearsal process, I listened to a lot of the Stones, and I'm a fan of the Stones, but I'm not like a huge avid fan. I don't know every single album like Jez, I'm sure, does. So I look forward to that moment because it's such a defining moment for the character and a great way to introduce this world. And it's I kind of think of that as being a little bit of a preamble to the show in itself, that first scene. But in terms of particular things, just stretching and warming up the voice and all the boring actor things that you need to do before you go out on stage.
I'm curious. Before we started the interview, we were talking, and you had mentioned working with Sam Mendes briefly, and you said he's a genius. And I think so. Obviously, he's a genius because the proof is in the pudding. When we go see the play, it looks genius. But for an actor working with a director, what about those intimate moments with him made you think like, oh, this guy is a genius? Like the way that he communicated with you.
That is the first thing. His ability to articulate ideas and to elucidate what it is that is happening in the play in a way that is fresh and surprising and illuminating and important, because not only does he know this world, but he's been living with it since its inception, and so he's just as steeped in this play as arguably as the playwright. So. That just because someone's there from the beginning doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be able to help you figure out what it is you need to do. And I suppose Sam's coming in and basically supporting and highlighting the work that Tim had done, his associate director, was illuminating, because it is just a question of sometimes turning the dial just to a tiny degree. And understanding that change or that little diversion of trajectory can have a huge significance for the character and how the scene might play out.
Do you have and if you don't, off the top of your head, I'll run past this really quick. Do you have a specific example that you remember?
Yeah, sure.
Of something that was like, wow, that's perfect.
A small but interesting thing. There's a scene in the play in the third act where Quinn realizes that the woman that's been living in his house, his sister-in-law, he's been told that she's been in love with him for a long time, and it's humongous. It's a humongous thing, and he's trying to figure out. There's a lot of things that are happening in the scene. I'll try to be brief, but basically, my wife is there at the time. And she's escorting the priest out, who's just giving me this information. And there's a moment where Quinn is alone on stage, and I had been kind of slumping into the chair and just kind of taking myself away from the moment, as if deflated and overwhelmed by the news of this huge information. And this is just one example. And Sam his note was basically, you can't be defeated until you're defeated. And so the change was just a change in posture and a change in keeping the moment alive for the connection for the audience, number one, but also for Quinn to be able to figure out what he's going to do with the information. My initial instinct was to be overwhelmed and to take myself away from it. And of course, the more interesting and more active thing is to be present, and more actively engaged in trying to figure out how I'm going to deal with this information. Yeah. And so it was just that was a really interesting change for me, and it really pays dividends in the scene that follows with my wife. So that's one small example.
But that is incredible, because having seen it last night and now you talking about it, the way that you are sitting in that moment, you are broad in your posture, and you're still trying to figure everything out and trying to conquer the situation and take care of everybody. Meanwhile, like
6 shows ago, you would have seen a different thing. And who knows if it would have made a huge impact on you, but But my guess is that because Sam knows where to fill in the cracks and to say, you got to just come over here a little bit, and it's gonna have more of a resonance.
Well, that if you hadn't been approaching it that way in that moment, the whole scene that follows with your wife would also be a completely different scene.
It would be different. I mean, I would hope that it wouldn't completely,
completely.
No. I'm not suggesting you were saying that. But I'm just saying for me, we're talking about degrees that hopefully are what makes Sam Mendes' expertise so valuable. Is that's the devil's in the details. And if you can get to that point where you're dealing with polishing things and you're being careful not to ornament too much and taking away things that are going to be a little too much. That's when something really starts to glisten. And we've got so far to go. I mean, we're only in our second week of performances, and there's so much to explore with this play. So that's the other great thing, is that we get to work on this thing and just keep turning that dial, with the instruction of great people like Sam Mendes and Tim Hoare.
It sounds like the most fun job in the world, to be honest with you.
It is.
The Ferryman is currently at the Bernard B. Jacobs Theater. It's one of the great plays. You're one of the great actors. Go see it. Bernard B. Jacobs Theater, 45th Street. Brian Darcy James, everybody, let's hear it.
Thank you. You're very kind. Thanks.